Welcome back to the Jessica Ash Wellness YouTube channel, coming to you with another episode of the Fully Nourished podcast. This is really the place where we explore together how female physiology and feminine energy kind of dance together to shape our life experience. I'm Jessica Ash, functional nutritionist and integrative health coach. You'll find that this podcast is about taking both a scientific and a spiritual look at why we as women have become so deeply burned out, almost at a soul level, and the real physiological consequences to that burnout. I want to explore together what it looks like to reclaim our feminine radiance and become deeply and fully nourished. If you like the podcast, please subscribe to the channel or even just this video. It really helps me out and just spreads the word. And with that being said, as a reminder, everything in this podcast is for education and inspiration only and is not intended as medical advice. Please talk to the appropriate professional when necessary, and please use common sense before making any changes to your diet or lifestyle. Thank you so much for being here. I love you, and I think that I look up to you so much in so many ways. There's so many times during my days that I think of you just because to me you are almost the epitome of like a true resilient feminine woman. And I like just in so many ways, you don't let anything define you, and there's so many facets to you. Like I feel like you have so much depth to you. And I always, whenever you say something or whenever you talk about something, it's like I always just want to know more. I want to know more about you. So it's like today I would love to dive into the Libby behind the mask in a way, and just I don't know. I know you have a very unique background. You have mentioned a few times on socials, and I only really know what you've talked about publicly of you growing up in a cult, and I find that just absolutely. I mean, I can't wait to hear about just how that's led you to this place.
Yeah. Oh, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I feel the same about you. I think because we've known each other for quite a long time now. I think it was like, what, 2019 or something. I was just kind of drawn to you, and I love how you've just always been, willing to kind of question things. Like, that's something that's super important to me. So, yeah, thank you for that. Thanks for having me. But yeah, so definitely grew up in a cult. So I was actually born into a cult. My parents left Australia. They are both from Tasmania, and they both got kind of recruited into this cult. It was called the Children of God. And they left Tasmania. They were just like hippies back in the day in like late 70s. And they went to Thailand, and I was born there. So I was actually born into a cult, which was pretty crazy because it's kind of all I ever knew. So I as a kid growing up as a teenager, I was within the confines of the cult. So I had to do like a lot of adult stuff from probably age 11, 12. I was just basically considered a full adult. So I had a very short childhood, and it was a very unusual childhood. So I didn't really get to have a childhood that most people have. And in a way, I feel like that's probably benefited me in some ways. But then at the same time, it's obviously caused me, to have a difficult childhood. And yeah, so I look back and I can see where it has benefited me as an adult. Like it's made me very independent. It's made me able to question everything, and I don't have any particular like strong stance on anything now. So in that way, it's helped me. But yeah, of course, it was very difficult in other ways as well. But yeah, like what in particular did you want to know about it? It's so hard to
I
talk
mean,
about it. It's not hard to talk
no.
about it, but it's hard to talk about it in the sense that it's so vast for me, and I have such a hard time explaining it in a nutshell to someone.
Yeah, because it's like, it was my life.
Yeah.
I, I guess I love the way that you say that it has shaped you. And I'm curious. So the part where you said that you missed out on parts of childhood that most people have. But on the flip side, it made you independent and it made you question everything. So at what point did you feel, because to you it was probably normal growing up,
Yeah.
like you didn't think anything of it, that was just your normal.
Yeah.
At what point did you, like, how did you, I don't want to say escape because that's like, I feel like that's like the story that everybody is after, but at what point did you just start thinking and questioning things and kind of coming into your own, and where did that lead you as a woman?
Yeah, it's really interesting because like as we were younger, we were always told that, so they called them systemites, anyone who
Mm.
wasn't in the cult. They were
Mm.
and if we left the cult, we were called backsliders. So it was very much shameful and guilt driven to stay in the cult. So growing up, we also were told that basically we were like Jesus was going to come back and he was going to rescue us, and like within our lifetime, like this was like a, so we had no like, long-term vision. We were just like,
Mm.
we're just doing this until he comes back to take us all up into heaven and everyone else is going to hell or whatever. So it was like this constant, there was this constant guilt and this constant very much shame-based reasoning for why we need to stay in the cult. So it was very much shame-based. Like we could not question anything. If we questioned anything, we were like got in trouble for it. So we were, punished quite severely for any
Mm.
sort of questioning or anything. So I guess I always, from probably around the age of like 8, 9, 10, 11, I always kind of knew there was something out there that wasn't part of my world. So I knew there was
Mm.
this big wide world, but I just never started to actually question it until I think it was just like puberty, adolescence. That's when I sort of started coming into my own. I guess it was my own personality as well. Just, you can call it genetics, you can call it personality, but interestingly enough, I was living with my mom and dad, and so I had been separated from when I was 7 up until I was 12, and I didn't barely ever get to see them. I was living in like a big compound, and I was separated from them. And then I went back to live with them at around age 12, and from around age 12 to 16, I was started obviously asking things and questioning things, and my little brain just started going off as it does. And my mom actually was the one who sent me away, and she sent me away. She told me, she's not around anymore, she passed away last year, but she told me this fairly recently that she could see herself in me and she didn't want me to get into trouble. So she sent me to the Middle East, which was part of the cult still, but it was a little bit less strict, I guess you could say. And
Mm.
so when I was 17, I went to the Middle East, and then I stayed in the Middle East from 17 to 21, and then I left the cult completely from the Middle East, came to Australia by myself at 21. So that's when I made the final decision.
Wow.
But during those years in the Middle East, I was slowly, it's insane to think about it. Like my brain was just making one connection after another
Mm.
until I finally had to make that leap and left.
So yeah, you're kind of like breaking through all of these. Really, what it is like brainwashing,
Yes,
and you're
completely.
like, I'm being told one thing. This is not what I'm seeing with my own eyes. Like, I
Yeah,
need to question it, and then okay, like I feel like you're like kind of unlocking one thing
yeah, one
at a
step.
time.
Another.
And
Yeah,
what's interesting? I know that your situation is different than a lot of religious groups out there right now, but it's there's some very similar themes of this idea of like you're not allowed to question anything. There's an us versus them mentality. This
massive.
idea that like you're always focused like right in front of you, kind of keeping you in that survival mode because then you're easy to control. It's like, oh no, at any point this disaster is going to happen. It's
Yeah.
it's not that far of a stretch from like what many people believe right now.
Yeah. And it's funny because while I can see the good side of me and the things that certain things developed, there's also ways that it damaged me.
Mm.
In the sense like what you're saying about how you're always so focused, you're only allowed to be focused on the present, you can't think long term. I mean, even now I'm like 41 and I still feel like I'm a child in many ways. I feel like I don't have the adult responsibilities, and like when it comes to things like finances, that's something I've struggled with my whole life, just being able to think, how am I going to save for the future, how am I, like all these things where it's just like you were not taught any of that, and like you were
Mm.
like even just figuring out directions or just different life skills. So I can see where it did damage me as well, and that's one of those massive things. And I feel like it's actually quite like it's done on purpose, so that you don't question and you don't think of the big wide world out there, and you only think about, survive. It literally was survival. Like, how can I not get in trouble today? How can I make sure I'm not questioning anything today? So having that constant, having to get out of that now that ever since I've left and slowly build my life, I can see how those things affected me as well. And I often tell my partner, I'm like, I just don't feel like everyone else is such an adult with their decisions. Like they have their whole life planned out. But still
Mm.
now I'm like, do you know what I mean? It's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard. Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I'm sure so many women listening feel that same way in some shape or form. I
Mhm.
know I feel like a lot of us especially, I feel like a lot of my listeners are religious in some way. I mean, I have a lot of Christian listeners, and there is some elements of that, especially like in the homeschooling community. I was homeschooled, and so that can be a big part of it, really
Yeah.
depending on the parents' view of the world and the community that they're in. It really determines how people get equipped. And if you don't think that anything in life is that important and you're just kind of focused on like Jesus coming back or, just surviving, you're not going to equip a child in the same way that you would if you were like, I want them to be a functioning adult. I want them to
Yeah.
not only like thrive, but excel. Like, I think of children like, here they are. They have so much to teach us, but we have so much to teach them as well. Like, let's do it a little exchange and let's guide each other. But it often is not happening that way any longer. So
Yeah.
okay, so you break through. I mean, you're growing up in such an interesting environment too. You grew up in Thailand.
Yeah.
You went to Tasmania, right? That was like the second place that you
Yeah.
went.
So I was in Thailand and then I went to the Middle East. I didn't actually I came to Australia once when I think I was 15, which actually played a very pivotal role in making the decision to leave. And that's because I sort of met some of my cousins and I was like, so I was in the cult, but we visited because my grandparents were about to die. So we visited and I even had one of them say to me, like, if you ever need anything, you can come and live with us. Like, so I was just like, okay. So there was little pivotal points, but yeah, I didn't actually ever move to Australia until I finally left the cult. So it was Thailand and the Middle East, of course, visiting a few other countries. Like I've been to like, just we used to have to do visa trips and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, from 17 to 21, I was in the Middle East, which was a whole unique experience in itself. And that's when I finally came to Australia when I was 21. So I literally was like done from the cult. So I like
Wow.
made the decision. I, had the leader. She was a bit psycho, but she took me in her room every day and she was crying and basically saying, are you sure you want to do this? Like all the guilt tripping and everything. But I found that when I made my decision, I made my decision. I wasn't going to be swayed.
Yeah. Yeah, like the control was slipping, which is why she was so sad.
It was scary.
Wow, that is insane. So, I mean, that's a brave step to just go off on your own. You went completely
Yeah.
just by yourself to
Yeah.
family.
So my older sister was in Australia, but she was still in the cult. So the cult was also here in Australia. So she had left Thailand and she had gone to Australia to join the cult here. So it was definitely more liberal. And there was more like they could do certain things like make money, for example. Whereas when I was in the cult, we had no money. So we weren't allowed to work
Wow.
for money. So we only had to work for the cult for free.
Wow.
Basically slaves, pretty much.
Wow.
But her and her husband were kind of starting to I guess probably make their own money in that. And her ex-husband, sorry, was against the cult and she was still in the cult. So
Mm.
there was this kind of dynamic there that was a bit weird. Anyways, I had to secretly ask her if I could borrow money from them to book a one-way ticket because I was not going to be given any money from anyone. So I was literally just going to be stuck in the Middle East with no money. So I had to find a way to come to Australia. So I messaged her and she sent through $1,000, enough for a one-way ticket, and I had someone help me in the Middle East actually book it and everything. He was in the call, of course, but there was like different layers of rebellion, different people and that. So I got that booked and yeah, I just got on the flight, had a stopover in Hong Kong. I remember I almost got lost because I just didn't know anything about the real world. Hong Kong's huge, the airport. I barely made the flight from Hong Kong to Australia. And then when I got here in Sydney, her ex-husband picked me up and that's where I started. And I lived with them for a bit. So because he was against the cult, they had moved out of the cult. She was still trying to be in the cult. So she would go there every day and work for them still. So it was this kind of weird thing where, yeah, like I remember having conversations about it with her and she was still like, oh, I don't want to talk about it and that type of thing. But I basically had to get set up here from scratch. I didn't exist in Australia according to them, so there was a lot of suspicion there of who I was. I had just left this call and I felt like I was in trouble for being a person here in Australia, like a citizen. It was really weird. Like I had to go to, they call it Centrelink here, which is where you get help from the government. and I had to get it's called New Start allowance, which is where you get a little bit of money to get you started, but you have to be looking for work. It was so complicated. They didn't accept any of my, because you have to get like a certain point system to show your actual identity. And I didn't have any of these things. I only had like a birth certificate in Thai, a citizenship paper, and a passport. And that wasn't enough total points. So I didn't have a driver's license. I had nothing. So I had to go to a random library and get a library card to make up the points so they could actually accept me as a human and an individual and
Wow.
a citizen. Yeah, it's really intense.
And
And
how
then
scary for
I know,
you.
yeah, I know. And then I'd start looking for work right away, just so I could, pay some rent to my sister and yeah.
Wow. Wow. So you're like here you're like I know nothing about any of this
Nothing.
stuff and you're just thrown right in.
Yeah.
Wow. And then like rewinding a little bit. So you said you couldn't work. You had to work for the cult. What did that look like? So you guys had no money.
No.
So what did that look like with like clothes and food
Yeah.
and stuff like that? Like were you guys always hungry and stuff like
We
that?
would, yeah, we would get hand-me-downs a lot for clothes. When I was in the Middle East, we got what we called like a little bit of money each month, like an allowance, but it was literally like $20. So I would just kind of use that for whatever, some jewelry that I wanted or something. But we would go to like, oftentimes we would go to markets or like these secondhand shops, thrift stores, and they would just be like, okay, you guys can get three pieces each or something. So you do that kind of thing where you, yeah, definitely not any like nice clothes. And with as far as the hunger, yeah, everything was basically rationed. Like you're not going to go and be allowed to have two pieces of fruit when you can actually only have one. So like everything was rationed. In the Thailand, when I was living apart from my parents, I became so skinny. I think that's why they actually sent me back to my parents. Um, like beyond skinny, like just malnourished. So I just didn't eat sometimes. Like they would do like mung beans and lentils, but cooked really gross for like lunch. And I was just the type of kid that if I didn't want it, I would just not eat. And then, yeah,
Right.
there was very little food and it was pretty gross. When I moved back to my parents, it's funny because we had a lot of the foods that people consider healthy now, and like they're all up on their high horse with their liver and stuff. But like that was like every month we had liver for dinner, or like, so I guess you get some healthy things from it, but yeah,
Yeah, just
the cheap
mostly
cut.
cheap. Wow. Wow. So getting established here and starting your own life, what did that look like for you? Like, how did you unpack that? Were you in a survival mode for a long time? Do you feel like
Yeah,
it just kind of unfolded as it did because you weren't really aware? You were just trying to survive, truly.
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Survival mode, 100% for a long time. Um, there's something even just about that I feel benefited me as well, and that is that I have the ability to not overly complicate things as well, because I was like, I've done all this and I've been through all this and I've had like a lot of close calls, even life and death things. And I so now I just don't overcomplicate life. I don't make things mean so much more than they have to mean, or like look for these, because I'm just like, it's like I was able to go through all of that and I'm happy today. Like I'm genuinely happy as an individual. So I think there's also that sort of side to people where it's like, sometimes life is just going to happen. Sometimes it's just going to suck. And it doesn't have to be always this deep personal growth. What do they call it? Like inner child healing and all this stuff. And I do think there's a place for that and it's important, but I think that's also very trendy right now. And it's like,
Mm.
if you look at other cultures, they just like, there's this TikTok trend where it's like my mom's like Indian parents or African parents, and it's like the way they talk about their kids versus the way their kids respond to something, and it's like night and day difference. And
Yes.
and I
Like,
get some of it's a trauma response, and like I get all of that, but at the same time, I think we overdo that a lot now. So yeah, I was definitely in survival mode, and it probably wasn't good for my hormone levels, my cortisol, and all of that. But then at the same time, it's the only way. It's literally the only choice I had, so I had to do what I had to do. I
yeah,
also got
that's when
pregnant.
survival is good. That's when survival is important.
I got pregnant the year that I left because I met a guy who I was seeing, and we were not allowed to use birth control in the cult. So I knew
Mm.
nothing about birth control,
Mm.
which is probably a good thing as well, because I didn't want to be on the pill. Like I tried it after for like 2 days and got off it, but but yeah, I got pregnant. So then you have to deal with that as
Oh.
well. And you
Wow.
know,
So you left while you were pregnant?
no, I got
Or
pregnant after in
oh,
Australia.
okay.
Yeah, I
Okay.
was seeing a guy for just 3 months and I got pregnant.
Oh, wow. Wow. Because here you are in this like super vulnerable situation, just trying to survive, trying
Mhm.
to create a life for
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
Wow. And how'd you feel with that? Was that scary to you as well? Or,
The pregnancy wasn't actually that scary because I had grown up since I was 11, 12, being nonstop taking care of kids, and I loved
mm,
babies. Like,
mm,
it wasn't actually even that scary. I was like, okay.
wow.
I bought everything for her from like a secondhand shop. I didn't get the most expensive pram, and I didn't, I just did what I could do. Yeah, it was great. It's funny. It's interesting.
That that's amazing. So becoming a mother, how did that change you? Going through all this and becoming a mother, do you feel like it in a way because I know you have such a good relationship with Ash now, and she's like such an amazing, amazing. Did you guys grow up together?
Yeah, it's
Did you guys
almost like
mature
a
together?
friendship as well.
Mm,
Yeah. It's interesting because she's obviously I had to have that parenting role and that mother role, but I feel like sometimes it's more just a friend, like, because I guess she's my size, my like she wears my clothes. Like it's just, yeah, it was a very unique relationship. But the thing I do like about it is that she trusts me to tell me things and she asks me for advice. And so it's, yeah, I feel like you could have some parents who kind of just is like more of a scary figure, whereas she's more of like a mom, or like there's relationship issues because she has a boyfriend. She's like, oh, am I normal for feeling this way? And I'm like,
mm,
yes, like let's work through that. So yeah, it's kind of good in that way. I think that's awesome. But having her as a young person and also trying to establish myself it was hard because there were times when I didn't even know if I had enough money to feed myself, so I could just buy her things. Or so
mm.
like in that way, like I was just broke for basically a good 10 years straight,
Wow.
having to put food on the table. And yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, I'm sure you had to sacrifice a lot.
Yeah.
Mm, mm. And it's just you're amazing because it's kind of do you have an attitude of just like I did it, it's done, what's done is done, and like I've moved on from it?
Yeah, I do. It's more that I actually really, really, really have a lot of compassion for the past version of myself. I
Mm,
actually like affectionately name her Little Libby. And anytime I think about the past version of her and what she had to do, I just have nothing but compassion.
mm,
So it's more that than what's done is done. It's more like that sucked, but like, wow, like the fact that I did what I did and that I went through what I went through and that I am who I am today. It's just like, it's honestly just compassion. So I think that attitude probably helps me
mm.
cope with things. And,
Absolutely.
they say as you get older, you feel more trauma from your past as well. And sometimes I do think about things a lot more, but I still just come back to that, like, yeah, I made mistakes, yeah, I wasn't always the best mom, but then it just comes back to compassion, and it's genuine deep compassion. And I try to put that also towards my current self and my future self, because I
Mm,
sometimes will need to do something that I feel like I don't want to do or whatever it is, and I just always think, but future Libby is going to just be so happy that you did this, or that you took care of yourself, or that you looked after that. So yeah, I think we can use that sometimes with healing compassion.
yeah. Yeah, that's powerful. That really is powerful. And I can't imagine if more women felt that way about their past because so many
Mhm.
women have been in places or experiences where they did truly, we've all done the best we can with what we had. Like
Yeah.
that there was nothing else we could do. We did the best we could with what we knew, the best we could with the resources we had, and how many of us are just kind of rehashing that over and over instead of focusing on what can I do here and now for like we
Yeah.
have a joke in our household too, like future self is going to be thanking current self, like this idea of
Yeah, I
like
love it.
let's
Yeah.
do a gift, like let's give future self a gift right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
And it's a powerful perspective. So I'm curious how you found fitness because you are the fitness queen. You are so fit, and I look up to you so much because you have such a discipline, but it's not from a place of like hyper obsession or hyper fixation that so many people in the fitness industry have where you feel like there's like compensating for something, right?
Yeah.
Like there's something behind there that's not healthy. Whereas
Yeah.
like you have a true passion for fitness, but it doesn't define your life,
Yeah.
and it's powerful, but you are extremely fit and in great shape. And I know you have quite the layered experience with fitness. So how did you find fitness amongst everything that was going on?
Yeah. So actually, when I was in the cult, we were allowed like 1 hour a day of exercise, and this was part of their beliefs that it was healthy. Um, so they actually were into the whole like let's be healthy, let's treat our bodies healthy, and like I guess it comes from like the Bible as well, like your body's a temple, and you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So they were
Yeah.
in like there's obviously some good in that. So we were told to eat our vegetables, and like we were told to exercise. So apart from like the rest of the day, the 1 hour that we had to exercise, we were kind of allowed to do, you could go for a walk, or you could, do exercise videos, which is what I chose to do, which was like the firm, Kathy Smith, Tybo,
Mm.
those types of videos where you have like your weights at home and you just follow along. I love the strength training ones, which is interesting. And I lifted pretty heavy weights. Like I'm lifting like 8, 9, 10 kilos over my head, dumbbells
Wow.
at age like 12, 13, and I was like obsessed with it getting stronger, and I think that feeling that I got, so that was the one time when I look back at my past and like all the times that I felt fearful and scared and unhappy and all that growing up, because there was a lot of those bad emotions. I felt how I wanted to feel during that hour of exercise, and I felt a little bit empowered and a little bit confident, and I felt like I was doing something that I had control over, and not control in a bad way, but when every single aspect of your life is taken, your control is taken from you, you reach for that one thing that you can control. And for me, that was exercise, and
Mm.
it built that relationship with it from a very young age. And when I came back to Australia again, having to deal with setting my life up, having to deal with like not knowing anything at all, being able to join a gym and being like, I can do this, I can join a gym, I can get stronger, I can make myself healthier from exercising. Being able to do that, I started that right away as well.
Mm.
And then I guess also just not having a education. So I didn't even like, we basically stopped homeschool, which if you could even call it that, at age like 11, 12, and we had to basically do full-time adult work. So cooking, cleaning for the
Wow.
whole house. So not really having anything to fall back on, I just thought of like fitness as so I did my certificate 3 and 4 in fitness as soon as I started getting some money, and I just paid it off over time. And then joined a gym to be a trainer as soon as I could once I, had the certification. So that's kind of the background of it.
Wow, that's amazing. And then from there, how did your fitness kind of evolve? Did you start, because I know you have a CrossFit background, but did you
Yeah.
start with CrossFit or?
Started in a regular gym, and I met
Mm.
my partner Jamie
Mm.
at that gym. He was a personal trainer as well, and we just became really good friends. And he was telling me all about this new thing called CrossFit, and it
Mm.
was 2009, so it was right when it was just a baby CrossFit as well.
Yeah.
And then I actually was like, why don't we just go to a CrossFit gym and try out an actual CrossFit class? So that's how it started. And then we started doing the classes as members, and we started doing like little competitions, CrossFit competitions, like just local ones. And then we were asked by the owners of the gym to become their head coaches, because we were both obviously like both personal trainers, both pretty good at CrossFit. Very, we loved the training side of it. So we're always showing up, and
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah.
so we got that job, and I was CrossFit coach for, I would say, I think it was like almost 8 years.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And are there things now, because I mean, you switch up your style of training
Yeah.
pretty regularly. It's different now. I've been noticing you guys like hiking now and doing. I don't even want to say hiking. This is like this is true adventuring. This is this is
Yeah.
extreme. But I'm sure you're seeing so many beautiful places that are pretty much untouched.
Yeah.
But
Amazing.
how did it influence your fitness? I guess in a positive way and in a negative way.
So the CrossFit, you mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, um, interestingly, I loved it. I didn't love the competing, and I started becoming more
Mm.
competitive in the sense that as a skill, I got better at it. So I became more competitive. The competition side of it I never liked, and
Mm.
Jamie always teases me about it, because I used to get like these butterflies in my stomach, and I used to start to feel like sick before a competition, and I just did not like it. I always loved the training though, like just it, I don't know what it is. I'm not personally a super competitive person, which is
Mm.
interesting because of like being in the fitness industry and all that. You always assume people are, but I'm actually not, and I don't like
Mm.
competition. If anyone tries to compete with me, I just shut it off and I just change what I'm doing, or I'll zig and zag constantly because I'm like, I will not be competed with. Like my personality. So if someone starts trying or I can see it, I'm just like, I'm doing that instead. So, but yeah, you kind of had to compete. And then as coaches, I always felt this pressure as well, like to be good at CrossFit and to compete. And I didn't like that side of it. So that's one thing. When I stopped doing CrossFit, I wasn't actually like, I'm going to stop doing CrossFit. Like I didn't put a hard line in the sand. I just went to my online business and I left CrossFit because my business was growing. So I became full-time online business and not a CrossFit coach. And the CrossFit was further away. And I was like, hey, let's just try programming for myself at a normal gym because I program for other people anyways. And then I started doing bodybuilding style. I guess you could call it bodybuilding. It probably pretty much was bodybuilding, hypertrophy training as they call it. But I also wanted to, from a aesthetic perspective, I was very much dominant in my upper back and even my rear delt. So they were super dominant. And I wanted to bring up some other muscles to make myself feel and look more balanced. So I wanted to bring up my glutes. I wanted to bring up my quads, and I wanted to bring up my shoulders, like my front delts. Because CrossFit's very, it does a lot of vertical pulling, a lot of Olympic lifting. And I was just like jacked, like massive. Like it's cool and all, but from like my own perspective, I was like, hey, let's see if I can, change my body. Like it was kind of fun for me. So that's why I went into that for a few years, which I also really loved. But then I also found that it kind of brought about certain things that were lacking in other ways. So now I like to do a combination of everything. Like just as an example, last year I was trying to do, I was doing a Cossack squat, which is where you're holding like something and you're going side to side. And I literally I used to be able to do these beautifully. And then I just felt like I had no balance. I couldn't do it. And this is after like lifting insanely heavy weights for squats and for lunges and for everything that's very much, vertical. So it's very much like you're not doing any lateral side to side stuff really with bodybuilding because it's not optimal, as they say. So it's not optimal for building muscle. So I felt like I was lacking in agility. I'm also naturally very much a sprinter. I have a lot of speed. I'm very quick. And I felt that slowing down a little bit as well, which is interesting because we do lose that as we age quicker than we even lose muscle. We lose power and speed as women. So I was like, okay, I don't really like that now. And so I wanted to bring back some of the other type of training last year. So that's when I kind of do a mix now of a bit of everything.
That's so cool. And I know that you do a lot of different programs. You now offer a lot of different programs for different approaches, I guess you would say. Like you have so many to choose from. It's actually crazy. Like whatever anyone wants, they get.
Different stages of life required, I think, as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And going back to the power and the empowerment that strength training brought you, and then this idea that, as we age, we often lose certain things, that feeling of being mobile, being lithe. There's a certain power to being strong as well, but there's also a certain power to being fast, to having speed, to having stamina. Like there's complexity to fitness. And fitness can bring such if you don't focus on it enough, it can slip away quite quickly. And so many people in the health and wellness world right now are so focused on just the individual details of every little thing. I mean, we're very aware of the information overload that's going on right now. And like, you can just get caught up in the minutiae of dieting and, perfecting your diet and supplements and all of these biohacking tools. But how much of this, I'm just curious about your opinion on how much of this is a lack of fitness? Like how much is people's health issues a lack of fitness?
Yeah, a lot. I feel like it might be an unpopular opinion, but I live and breathe this with women.
Yeah.
Like this is where I just don't understand why people still don't accept that and it's not just the muscle, it's the acute effects that come from exercise, because there's obviously long-term effects, which basically is your adaptations. So when you exercise, your body creates adaptations, whether it's muscle building, whether it's endurance training and cardiovascular fitness, there's always adaptations if you're training properly. So that's one thing. And everyone loves how many reels have you now seen about like the benefits of muscle and how it's the longevity organ, and everyone loves that, right? But then there's also the acute benefits that nobody talks about, like things like insulin sensitivity, blood sugar balancing, better sleep, better energy. It actually creates energy. When you do certain types of training, like aerobic training and HIIT training, it actually increases our mitochondria. Like, it's insane. And everyone talks about this whole like bioenergetic space and bioenergetic, but it's like these things actually have that effect on the body, like when used properly. Of course, all the disclaimers there, we don't want to overtrain and everything, but when you're doing it properly in a well-fed body and someone, and you're fueling your exercise, you're not doing it from a place of fasting and all that, it actually has really positive benefits for our energy, insulin sensitivity, like all of that, mitochondria. And I'd say that people are missing a really important foundational piece by doing all these other things to improve their health, but they're not doing the one thing that has like a super substantial effect. And I would say it's on par with nutrition, and putting so much focus on nutrition. It's like part of it, right? But the issue is that it's not easy. So it's not like we can just pop a pill. We can't just take our liver capsules and expect that it's doing something, because it actually takes that effort and that work. And the other thing it actually takes is building it up slowly. And I see so many people just try and do it so quickly, or they'll go into it full pace, and then they have bad side effects from it because their body's not adjusted and accustomed to it. And then they'll be like, it's not good for me, I've got intolerance, or whatever the case may be. But they just need to slowly, really gradually build it into their life, and then it will become easier, just like anything.
Yeah, like you can't expect the body to rise up and meet this huge challenge just randomly in these short spurts. It's almost like you need to build it's just like laying a foundation of anything else. It's like going outside in the sun and just burning yourself alive for 3 hours. You need a little bit of like a base layer. This episode is sponsored by Lovebird cereal. Lovebird grain-free cereal was founded by a father on a mission to clean up cereal with real food ingredients that help support gut health and have no fake stuff. Traditional cereal can be loaded with refined grains and refined sugar, along with a lot of fake ingredients. From the first to last ingredient, they are the best you'll find in cereal, starting with prebiotic fiber-rich cassava from small regenerative family farms as the first ingredient. Finally, a cereal you can confidently serve your family that also tastes great. I personally love seeing Lovebird on the shelves at my local Sprouts. Use code JessicaAsh for 10% off your order at lovebirdfoods.com. So I know you have, I guess, what maybe people get a little bit like prickly about the idea of that exercise intolerance is not as much of a thing as we think it is. And I actually had, well, by the time this interview gets published, the interview will already be out, but I actually interviewed Jenna Ham, who she talks about. I think you might follow her as well. Her Instagram handle is Felt Sense, and she talks about how mobilizing energy, even if you have a lot of trauma, like mobilizing energy is really important. I would say that's one of the acute effects of stress or of exercise, where you're mobilizing some of this energy that needs to get out of the body. And I think of how many women are in a state of true burnout, where they've pushed their bodies too far. Maybe they've been really underfed. Maybe they have gone through bouts of over-exercise or pushing their body beyond its limits. But then they get this messaging of like they need to stop everything, rest completely, slow down, and they're actually feeling worse now. And now they keep trying to exercise and they feel like they're intolerant to exercise. So what would you say about that? And where should someone start if they do think that they're exercise intolerant? Like, what is the steps? What are the beginning steps to that? And how do they reframe that?
Yeah. So I think exercise intolerance itself is a medical condition, but I don't think that everyone who says they have it has that as a medical condition. Like, if you do search for it, I do believe, I haven't looked it up recently, but I do believe there is an actual medical condition. So obviously I'm not referring to that, but I'm referring to like a multitude of people that say they have it now. And it's almost becoming this identity, which is what I find like kind of a little bit damaging, even because it's like we were made to, I always tell women, like, why do we have legs then if running is so bad for us? Like sprinting, like, why do we have arms that can lift things? Like, why do we have to do things in life? And like, but yeah, we can't do those things because it's weights, right? So I often like bring it back to just our physiological bodies and our natures. You look at animals, they run, they sprint, right? And I'm sure back in the day as humans, we had to sprint away from things and we had to use our bodies as well. So yeah, it doesn't seem to really make sense in that way. But what I would tell them, so I honestly just think it's oftentimes a case of being extremely deconditioned and
Mm.
extremely out of shape and unconditioned. And I have a lot of experience working with beginners because when I was a CrossFit coach and even before that as a personal trainer, I would have a complete beginner come to the class and we would have to guide them through how you're going to have how you're going to have longevity in CrossFit is by starting with the foundation. So we would do fundamental classes where we just teach them the very basics. And, we'd put a little finisher in there and they would be on the floor. They would be dizzy. They would feel like they get like nauseous and dizzy. And then I would tell them like, yes, this is happening right now. It's hard, but I promise you, if you come back again in 3 days and you do another class, and then you come back again in 3 days and you do another class, it will get easier. And I'm literally have like proof of these people coming and getting more conditioned and getting stronger. And they would tell me they feel better and they look better and their skin clears up and they're just doing these things that are making them feel better and they're getting stronger. Like I had women who we teach the lifts, like the Olympic lifts, and we have to start with just a broomstick, like because they were so like you want to teach good form, but like one of the girls could barely even lift the broomstick over her head. Like we have such a distinct memory, my partner and I often talk about her. And then by the time when I was leaving CrossFit as a coach, she was like snatching 70 kilos. Like
Wow.
it's not like we have so much potential, but there's so much fear mongering now that just strips away at that potential that we have. And I always come from a health first perspective. So it's not healthy to train every single day. You need to have rest days. It's not healthy to overdo it. Of course, these things aren't healthy. But I think now it's almost gone too much the opposite extreme where it's like, oh, I can't really go for a run. Or now there's like this new fear mongering about perimenopause and menopause and they can't do cardio. And it's like, that's all ridiculous. Like
Mm.
you can do anything if you work up to it properly and you have obviously that health first perspective. So you're putting your health first, your recovery first, but you can become adapted. Your body is an adaptable machine. That's what it's made to do. So
Right.
I would just say you just got to start really, really like light, and you got to start with even just like movement. Like let's say you want to do a little bit of cardio, just do like a few little seconds of running and then walk again, or like start where you're at. Don't try and push yourself to the point of like no return. And then the other really interesting piece of advice I have is that I am a big proponent of frequency.
Mm.
So not intensity, frequency, especially for beginners. Like say you want to adapt, you want your body to adapt to that feeling of exercise and how you obviously you get out of breath and you have to use more energy and you have to use more oxygen. If you're doing that frequently but just shorter sessions, you will adapt faster than if you're expecting yourself to once a week do it and push yourself really hard and then you're dead for the rest of the week. So I'm
Mm.
a really big proponent of frequency as well,
Mm.
with exercise in general.
Yeah. No, I think that's really important too because as you get more comfortable with that, it just becomes easier. It's also carving that space in your schedule. There's so many aspects to it. I do wonder too if there's a part of our culture is allergic to discomfort.
Yeah.
And exercise, especially when you're just starting out, is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's not comfortable at all.
No. And it doesn't mean it's bad though. That's the thing. Like
Mm-mm.
it's the effort and the discomfort is not the same as like an acute bad pain. It's just something that's natural. Like accepting that is important for sure.
Mm, Do you think that exercise also builds a type of mental tenacity or a mental strength because you're constantly facing that discomfort and like overcoming it?
Yeah.
Do you feel like over time you've gotten stronger and stronger mentally from exercise?
Yeah, definitely. I think it plays a role in resilience, like massively. Um, because the amount of things in life that you have to deal with that aren't comfortable that tend to derail a lot of people, I feel like they don't derail me. And I'm not saying that from like, oh, I'm such a strong person, but I feel like I have the capacity mentally and physically to know that I can deal with these things as they come up. So like I know everyone's different though and people are affected differently, but just that strength of knowing like, hey, I just did that really tough run, or I just did that hard exercise, or I just did whatever it is. Just having that self-trust and that confidence that it brings within you to know that say something does happen that's out of your control in life in another way, you feel that self-trust and you rely on yourself and your confidence that you can deal with it because you have that proof. You're living proof of it from all those times you've had to train and all those times you've had to do those hard things. So you kind of have that proof, if that makes sense. And I think a lot of it is self-trust and knowing that you can deal with something.
Mm, mm. And yeah, I mean, that builds self trust in multiple ways because you also are trusting yourself and following through on what you want, like your goals and what you're after. I
Yeah.
mean, there is a type of trust and follow through and being able to trust yourself that you're going to do what you say you're going to do. Um, I I think there's a lot of information right now out there about strength training. I mean, and just fitness in general, right? There's just, and I feel like it kind of goes in cycles. You'll see trends pop up and then go away and pop up and go away. What are some of the biggest mistakes that women do or partake in when it comes to fitness that you're seeing?
Um, so I think that there's like two extremes. I feel like one of the extremes is women. So there's like a very much a trend now of like, raise your arms 10 times to snatch your waist, for example, or it's like so dumbed down. It's all over TikTok. It's like, or, lift these cups in your kitchen and you can grow your glutes. And it's like everything's just so dumbed down for women. And it really annoys me because, first of all, it's not trusting that women have the intelligence and the capacity to take on these tougher topics and actually learn them. Like, do we tell men to bicep curl their friggin' coffee cup to build their biceps? No. Like, why are we doing this to women? It's super irritating to me. But that's one trend. So what it makes women think again is that there's no effort needed. There's nothing involved with building muscle. So that kind of annoys me a little bit because it's like, no, it's it takes a lot of time. First
Yep.
of all, like it takes consistent time. And then it also takes pushing yourself that little bit more than just what a lot of women think. And I know that they see a lot of it on social media now, TikTok, Instagram, like, oh, I can just do that easily and I'll get results. But then they get discouraged because they don't get results. So that's one side of the extreme. But then the opposite side of the extreme is this whole like optimal training trend, which is super popular right now, where it's like the only thing that matters is that you're building muscle. Nothing else matters. You have to do these super highly stable exercises. Otherwise, you're going to put too much stress and fatigue on your body. And you're not going to be able to recover and build muscle. Everything else is junk training. So then there's that other extreme, which I also don't agree with, because I think, as I said, there's more benefits to doing a variety of movement, a variety of exercise. We don't want to be just stuck in one type of thing. Although there is time and place. Like I did do like a muscle building phase myself where I was primarily doing that type of training. So it can be useful, but I think it's just these very dogmatic approaches that really grind my gears.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like that applies to everything. Whereas if you don't have complexity or nuance, you're going to lose out in the end. And if a woman really is after body recomposition, because I think a lot of women, they just say, like, I want to be smaller, or I want to be, I just want to lose weight. Or it, how do you redefine this for women? And I know you work with a lot of beginners, and then you also work with a lot of more serious athletes. And do you see that both groups of women are always just like, I want to lose weight, I want to cut, I want to lose fat, or what's the pattern there? Because I think every woman is after body recomposition. If we really admitted it to ourselves, like, we want to be hot, we want to have an aesthetic look about us, and that might be different for each one of us. Some of us want to maybe look a little bit more muscular, some of us want to look a little bit more lean, but at the end of the day, what it requires is for us to have muscle and to also have fitness and be able to maintain a certain body fat percentage.
Yeah, for sure. I think that what I like to do is actually kind of boil it down to what they really want, because a lot of times what they're saying is not the exact definition of what they want. Whereas a lot of coaches or online people are like, they get angry at women for saying that they want to be toned because they're like, being toned just means having muscle. And it's like, but I understand what you mean when you say you want to be toned, but let's, describe like what's a particular feeling you want. What do you like? How do you want to look, even like all those things. I think that's important to get to the bottom of it for women, because if I say, so you just want to lose fat, but that you're not going to have like the curves and the muscle that comes with building muscle. So do you want to just be skinny? Do you like, so I think that it's important to understand where their mind is at. And I think that from a marketing perspective, for me, that's important as well, because you cannot help someone if you are not explaining it in a language that they understand. And they might use these words that aren't technically right, but I get where they're coming from. At the end of the day, they want to Usually they want to have like tone, as they call it, which is some form of more muscle on their body than they currently have, but they also do want to be able to see that muscle and see those lines and that definition and that shape a little bit, where it's not just like they're feeling really big or bulky. So
Mm.
that's generally the kind of thing I get from women, when they tell me. And I don't think that it's wrong, and I think that it's been overly, like you were saying before about how sometimes you almost feel like people, like influencers or people, are coming at it from their own biases, and it's almost like they're projecting what their experiences were in the past to other women. But I think this whole like not allowing women to say that they want to look better, or not allowing them to say that they want to look hot and they want to have a particular body shape, in a way it almost dehumanizes women,
Mm.
because we're basically telling them they're not allowed to have certain desires or feelings, like wanting to improve their appearance, or lose fat or feel attractive. And I feel like it does have this dehumanizing effect, which
Mm.
I guess in a broad sense involves denying someone that full complexity, depth, and range of human emotions and experiences. And
Mm.
we are human. Of course we want to look good, of course we want to feel good. Like, of course we want our husband, like, I know for me, when my partner thinks I'm sexy and hot and I can just see it in his eyes that he wants me, it's like, that fucking makes me feel good. Like,
Right.
I mean, like, why do we, like, I'm a woman. I want to feel womanly. I want to feel wanted. And I don't like that it's gone so far this other way, where it even annoys people on my Instagram. Like, that's what I'll get a lot of, not hate comments, but like people will unfollow me, or they'll tell me they're unfollowing me because I'm making it too much about building your glutes or whatever the case may be.
Mm.
But it's like, well, everyone else wants it. We all know they want it, because I talk to women on calls and they are sometimes in tears telling me that they do not like the way they look and they feel horrible about their body. And what, we're just going to invalidate that? Like, why? Like,
Mm.
that's horrible to do that to someone. They're human. They have these feelings, they have these emotions. So what I actually like to do with them is, and I do it with myself as well, is bring it back to their values and their core desired feelings. And a lot of times they'll say, I love my pre-baby body and I want that body back, or I want to be like, I want to look like I looked 10 years ago because I love that, right? And granted, they probably felt they didn't always feel the best. Maybe they weren't healthy or whatever. But can we get to the core desired feelings that they had when they looked like that they want to recreate those feelings? Maybe
Mm.
they felt sexy. Maybe they felt confident. There's nothing wrong with, like, if they actually had feelings when they were a certain size, it's not about the size, it's about the way it made them feel. And it
Mm.
always comes back to how it makes you feel. Like, so I try and help guide them with let's pick some core desired feelings, let's pick some values that you want, and then we can work towards those in a healthy way with our daily behaviors and our daily actions to get you the result that you want. But we're never going to get there by pretending like it doesn't exist, by pretending like women don't want to look good and they don't
Mm.
want to feel good. And we can do it in a healthy way as well.
Right, right. I think there's a lot of women who maybe did get to that place in an unhealthy way, and it's almost like they're afraid that's going to happen again. So it's
Yeah,
keeping them
that's
from
true.
trying.
Yeah.
And it's important for anyone listening that feels that way is you can't go back to what you didn't know. Like now you know what you know. You're not going to make those same mistakes moving forward. And sometimes we do have to just try again
Yeah.
and do it a different way. But it does require change. And I think so many women feel almost ashamed for admitting that they want to look better.
Yeah.
And it's okay to say, I want to look different. I want to look better. It doesn't mean I don't love myself. It doesn't mean that I don't, I'm not content with myself or anything like that. But it's okay to want to change while
Yeah.
still bringing back that really powerful self compassion that you
Yeah.
brought up at the beginning of this conversation, where you can have compassion for yourself and still in that compassion want to change.
Yeah, 100%. And even
Mm.
just curiosity, I think curiosity is a big one, and neutrality. So much of a,
Mm.
so we have such a hard time being neutral with ourselves. So it's either this extreme shame, or it's like, let's just be like horrible to ourselves, like undereat and overtrain. Like, why can't we just have, like, look at it from a neutral standpoint? Like, if it was your daughter, right? It's like, I would not, I validate her when she tells me she doesn't like something about her body, or she doesn't, I'm not going to be this one of these people who are like, you're beautiful just the way you are. Like, of course I think that, but it doesn't help anything to just constantly have someone invalidate you as well. So I feel like we should validate ourselves, like
Mm.
validate your feelings, get to the bottom of what you actually want. How do you want to feel? Because it might not even have to do with your body that much.
Mm,
There could be other ways as well that you can bring those feelings back into your life as well.
mm. Yeah, that's a great point. And I guess that brings us to motivation, because I think a lot of people feel like everything in their life they should right now there's a lot of messaging of like I should be in complete alignment. And I think alignment is important. But when you break down alignment and daily action, not every day and every moment are you going to feel completely aligned or motivated to do each individual step that's going to get you to where you want to go. So, like, I guess how do I want to phrase this question is it important to love the type of exercise that you do? And when you don't feel motivated, how do you find motivation to exercise?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it is important from a big picture perspective to love the exercise you do. As in, like, we don't want to be hating exercise constantly, right? But I think that there is definitely like we should not expect to have this perfectly motivated feeling and this perfect feeling and like even just perfectly recovered and like whatever our arbitrary definition of that is. Like everyone thinks they know what it feels like to be perfectly recovered, but we actually don't, because the true definition of recovered from a muscular standpoint is if you are able to progressive overload. So if you are not able to progressive overload, you can't get stronger, then that means there's a recovery issue. But if you can get stronger, even if you felt like you felt like shit that day, but you went and had an awesome session, your brain might not have really been telling you the truth, right? And the thing that I always come back to is that our brain wants us to feel safe. It doesn't want us to feel confident. It doesn't want us to feel happy. It doesn't even want us to feel healthy. It just wants us to feel safe. So we can't always trust it. And I know this from my past and my upbringing and being in survival mode so much, is that some of the things that we don't want to do are actually going to be good for our health, and they're actually going to be good for even the way they make us feel, and they're going to make us feel happier. But it's our brain telling us sometimes that it's not safe because for whatever reason it's decided that it's a threat, because maybe it's hard or whatever the case may be. So I think coming at it from that perspective, not always expecting to feel physically a certain way before we exercise is good, although there is nuance there. Like I listen to my body as well, but I think that that's one important side of it. And then the other side is that I think we can also train and exercise and do things from a broad range of emotions. I mean, if you've ever had like an angry training session, I don't know if anyone who's listening has, but it can be very therapeutic. We can use different emotions to motivate us. It doesn't just have to be I feel like I'm on top of the world, so I'm going to go train type of thing. So that's another thing that I tend to use. And then the thing that helps me personally is that I have like, I call it structured flexibility. So within my structure, my basic structure, I allow myself flexibility. And this actually gives me autonomy, which is a huge core value of mine. And I feel like I'm deciding for myself. So I'm not stuck in this extreme routine where I have to do this particular session and I have to increase the weights, otherwise it's pointless. So I give myself flexibility. And what that could look like for me is maybe I'm going to decide that I'm not going to do my weights training session, but I'm going to swap it for my run today. And I'm still doing the things that are guiding me towards my values, and I'm still being healthy and making the right decisions, but I'm allowing myself the flexibility. Or I have 2 gym memberships, which might be a bit strange to some people, but I guess because I'm a trainer and stuff, it's not as strange. And I can be like, mate, which one do you want to go to today? Like there's just these like little flexible things that really make me feel good. I don't know why. It almost brings a little bit of luxury to my life. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I sometimes have 2 gym memberships as well, and sometimes I'll actually go try a new gym, just pay for a day pass, because it's just like it's new. It brings a little bit of a different layer of like a complexity of like I'm gonna go play around in this new environment today.
Yeah, so that really helps me with motivation. Or sometimes if I wake up and I'm feeling, because I have like 2 different calendar skeletons, and one is when I train in the morning and one's in the afternoon. And I realize this isn't realistic for everyone, but I base it sometimes on how I'm feeling that day. So if I wake up and because I'm very much a creative person, and sometimes I just get like bombarded with creative thoughts, or like like I need to do this now. And I'll be like, I'll train in the afternoon, and I can book that, I can use that calendar, and there's a space for that. If I'm really like you said before, if I feel like I need to release energy, like maybe I'm struggling with something mentally or whatever, I find it really helps my day by getting that training done in the morning. And then I
Mm.
feel really good the rest of the day. So there's that flexibility in my schedule as well. And these things motivate me for sure. But yeah, I think, using other emotions sometimes for motivation is good. And for me, that I call it structured flexibility.
No, I love that. That's such a great tip because really what you're doing is you're reframing. I think a lot of people look at exercise as like a thing to check off the list
Yeah.
or this type of drudgery, like, okay, I just carve out this hour a day and I'm just going to get
Yeah.
it done. And what you're doing is it's like you reframe exercise as a tool for true wellness
Yeah.
and you use it as a tool how it's supposed to be used
Yeah.
and give yourself that flexibility. That's amazing. And so for people that are complete beginners and I hear that excuse a lot of like, I don't know if I've been ever have time to exercise or I'm just looking for something easy. I think every time you talk to people nowadays, it's like, I need something to be easy. I need it to fit into my schedule easily.
Yeah.
And how do you help people find the time and get into a consistent routine? Because I feel like that's the hardest part is if you've never had that discipline before,
Yeah.
that getting in that routine is difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that oftentimes when someone tells me they don't have time, I ask them further questions because oftentimes it's not that they actually don't have time, or it might look like they don't have time, but it's usually other reasons or other motives. And one of those things might be a fear of starting, or like
Mm.
if you're completely honest with yourself, do you actually not have any time? Like that's what I would start with. Because like we do make time. I know it's so generic sounding and so cliche, but we do make time for the things that are important, right? Like if you
Mm.
have it scheduled into your calendar as an actual appointment, like you need to go to the dentist or you need to go to the eye doctor, like that important, or even just like eating lunch, that's scheduled in somehow. For probably it's not for everyone, but it should be, right? Like
Right.
that's how I would look at exercise. It's literally that important to me. Like you're doing something very much for your self-care, right? So that's one aspect of it, is just kind of just make sure you're saying that you don't have time because you actually don't have time. Like you physically do not have an ounce of time. And if that
Mm.
is the case, oftentimes I tell women that I work with that we need to make it a thing. So you need to involve your partner, you need to involve your family. Like when I decide I'm going to make something a thing, they know I go psycho about it. I put it on the fridge and I'm like, guys, this is the time that I'm doing this. I need you guys to keep me accountable, Ash and Jamie, and help me with this. I really want to do this. And it's a full family affair, right? Like I'm like, and I tell them to do it as well. Like we all do that. So it becomes a thing that everyone's involved in. So if mom needs to train, then mom needs to train, and we need to support her in that, right? So you need to make it a thing, like rather than thinking that it's this quiet thing that you're going to do so that your husband doesn't have to take time with the kids extra out of his day, and it's just like this, if I can make it, I can make it. So yeah, like
Mm.
respect it more, I guess, make it a thing. That's a great way from like a practical strategy suggestion. And then in terms of how to actually start, yeah, definitely start with, I like starting with so say you're completely out of shape, like you have not done any training, then walking is always excellent. And I think it's super underrated. Like build your walk up. Like that's going to build aerobic capacity if you don't have any really yet and you're not walking that much, it really does build aerobic capacity. Think about, is there some routes with little hills that you can go on to sort of like push that little bit of cardiovascular fitness, because we want to have that base aerobically to be able to do the harder things like the weight training and all that as well.
Mm.
And then with weights and that, I would honestly just start. You can start at home with like dumbbells, but you want to have something that will create an adaptation. So you want to see results, right? So if it's too light or if it's too easy, it's not really going to create the muscle building results that you want. So you can start at home if you're a complete beginner. Otherwise, I often just recommend, I'm like, why don't you just try joining a gym? Like, because a lot of times there's just a fear there, and it's because they've never done it. Like, of course it's scary. I mean, I get scared when I see a new machine still. I'm like, how do I use that?
And you're like sitting on there trying to like kind of figure
And
it
then
out.
that people are watching you and you're sitting the wrong way or something. Like, I totally get that.
Yeah.
Sometimes what you can do as well is go to the cardio equipment area and like do like treadmill or whatever, and just look at the machines and sort of scan the gym and see how people are using them. Like, simple, practical ways to get started is important. But then there's also the mindset side of it, which is huge. And this is something after I did my Easter sale where I was selling programs, where it got to the point where I would have someone message me and they're like, can you make this 30-minute session 20 minutes for me? And can I only do it 2 days instead of 3 days? And then I was kind of like, this is the program. Like, this is my expertise. I'm not just blah putting junk out there. Like, it's literally my thought out expertise. And you're asking me to change it. Like, do you go to your accountant and say, oh, I don't want to follow your advice because ABC? So it's like, commit to something, like do it properly, and then, build up slowly. And, then you can decide if it's not working for you. But like they often say, they have all these demands. I need it to literally be 15 minutes. I can only do 2 times a week. And I only have 3 different dumbbells and there's nothing else. And I will not buy anything else. And I will not. So it's like, I get it. But then also they'll spend a lot of money on supplements sometimes. So I think there's just priorities as well. And then also remembering that it's something that will take time and patience, and it happens slowly. Like building muscle, getting fitter, it's a slow process, and it requires, as I said, frequency and slowly increasing the intensity, slowly building up. So yeah, but yeah, I get that it's daunting, definitely.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I feel like even if you're a seasoned gym goer, there are parts of it that you still get. You're just like, oh, I'm so stupid, or like I just did something that was really dumb. But it's what it is, and
Yeah.
no one really is paying attention to you. Like no one's really watching you. It can feel that way, but no one really is.
Yeah, I have one more tip actually, which I
Yeah.
personally use. If I'm feeling not motivated, and I know it's not like I'm sick or something, I'm just like I cannot be bothered going to the gym or training. I play games with myself, and one of those games is I tell myself just drive to the gym or walk to the gym and just do the warm up, right? If you're doing the warm up and you're feeling like absolutely exhausted and you just can't do it, then you're allowed to say, no, I don't want to train. But if you just go to the gym anyways, do your warm up, put some good tunes on, see how you feel, usually I get motivated. It's the
Yeah.
crazy thing about it. So but I, again, it comes back to that giving myself that flexibility or that autonomy, that ability to make that choice, but still having that little bit of structure. So it's like, go there, just try it out, see how you feel, and then you can decide. And I probably only once ever turned around and gone home. Like, because
Yeah.
when you make all that effort, right? But I remember I was just having like, I was not in the headspace or anything. So I went home one time. But other than that, it's always worked pretty well for me, like to do that. So you're giving yourself that permission. So you're validating your feelings. You're not saying you're such an idiot, you're never motivated, get your ass to the gym right now. But instead you're validating how you're feeling. And I feel like my brain likes that.
Yeah, mine does too. And I do the same thing. I've done the same thing for years where it's like, just go and walk on the treadmill for like 5 minutes. And if you
Yeah.
really don't want to be here, like, you can
Yeah.
leave. And I don't think I've, like you said, like, I maybe have left the gym once or twice because it's like once you get there and you've carved that into your routine, you actually want to be there and you're like, I want to get this done.
Yeah.
So, and it also gets you into that habit of carving it into your routine because I feel like that might be the hardest part of beginning, at least
It
from my
is.
perspective, is just getting that habit of making it a part. Because once it becomes a part of your life, it's just, it's easy. It's a part of your life. So,
And I think that's so important. And I've even told women, even if they can only drive to the gym, do one thing and drive home, that's really important for their, also just for the fact, like we talked about before, keeping those promises to yourself as best as you
mm,
can builds self-trust.
yeah, absolutely. No, and you can, and don't like beat yourself up about not doing more. Just celebrate
Yeah,
it and be like,
exactly.
wow, you did so good getting there today. And then do it
Yeah,
again the next day. Like
yeah,
it's just, it's building. So, I mean, we've covered so much today, but I'm sure there are women listening to this saying, okay, I'm either a beginner or I exercise very casually and I've never followed a program. What are some benefits for both beginners and even people that maybe have exercised casually or train regularly but don't follow a program? What is the benefit to following a program that, I mean, of course, has been programmed by someone like you who this is your bread and butter, but what are the benefits to a program?
yeah. I think the main benefit is that you know that there's going to be the progress there in terms of the adaptations. So
Mm,
oftentimes when you're just doing random stuff, sure, you might have adaptations, but you have no proof of those adaptations because then you're just going and doing something else. So let's say you're repeating the same program and it's always squats every Monday. and you know that you're slowly getting stronger and you're slowly maybe adding another rep or whatever the case may be, that is your information that what you're doing is working and that what you're doing is getting you results. If you don't have that, you don't actually have any information. So it's not bad, because as we said, there's also those acute effects of exercise, and that's any exercise. Like, there's so many acute benefits as well, but we want both, right? We want to have, because obviously that muscle and those adaptations are very important and they're precious. Like, we want to have as much as we can as we age, particularly for women as well, like, going into the 40s and 50s, where there's that really, really big risk of osteoporosis and brittle bones. Like, it's a huge risk.
Yeah.
And like I've actually read some research recently that the majority of people in their older years lose quality of life from the after effects of a fall. It's not from the lack of muscle itself. It's that the muscle creates them this instability, and they fall and they hurt themselves and they can't ever recover back from that. So that's what actually sacrifices their quality of life. And it's a huge percentage. I can't remember if it was like 80% or something. I'll have to double check it. But yeah, so in that way, we want the muscle for sure. We want to have the strength and the muscle. In order to know that it's happening, we need to have some form of progressive overload and also mechanical tension. So mechanical tension is what causes the muscle adaptations to happen, because it sends the signal to our muscles that there's work that needs to be done and there's going to be future work. So we need to adapt accordingly, because there's only this level of strength, and this person is continuing to do these things that will require more strength. So therefore we need to adapt and build more muscles so that they can handle what's coming. So that's basically what the concept of progressive overload is. And mechanical tension is how we get that. So that's by lifting heavy enough weights for us that we're going to send that message and that adaptation to our body. So in order to do that, you'll want to be following a program and seeing that you're increasing on those lifts. And if it's something like cardiovascular fitness, it's a good idea as well to have that, okay, so how fast did I sprint? How long did it take for my heart rate to come back down? Is that improving? And then we know we have this feedback from our bodies that we are improving and we're building the muscle. So yeah, I think that that's the main reason why I would say it's important to follow a program.
No, that's amazing and helpful, because I think there are so many people that just maybe go and lift the same weights over and over and over again, not realizing that if that muscle is growing, you should be able to lift a little heavier and a little heavier, or add some challenge to that exercise over time.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be as extreme as people say it does as well, because there's that side of it too, where it's like, if you're not lifting every time you go to the gym, if you're not increasing weight, then something's wrong. But it's like, I think it's like a macro view. If you look over the months, have you gotten stronger over the months? That's what matters, because some days we're not going to be up to it. It depends on even our cycle does affect it.
Right.
It affects I think it more affects what we think we can do than what we actually can do. That's what the research shows, at least, that it's yeah.
Because I know, like, I have some days where it's like I just don't really feel like pushing it, but I'm just gonna lift the same same weight that I did last time. It's not a big deal. Like, I can handle it, but it's just a way to like get moving. So there's that there. It's like not like, oh my gosh, I'm never gonna get stronger. It's like over time I will definitely get stronger. So I know that you talk a lot about recovery, and this is going to be my last question, but I think a lot of people get so hyper-focused on the exercise aspect of it, and they forget that where, yes, the work is done in the gym, but the muscle is actually built during the recovery. The results actually come during the recovery. And so what are certain things that you focus on for really strong recovery, and just better results over time?
Yeah. Obviously sleep is a huge one. I think if you have any way to, just increase that deep sleep, particularly because the deep sleep is where the actual adaptations happen with the muscle growth. So that's really important. If you're someone who doesn't get much deep sleep, doing all the things that you can to help improve your sleep is really important. I also like movement. So movement is actually really helpful, because when you're moving enough, even including things like cardio and zone 2 cardio, you're sending a lot of blood flow to those areas. And oftentimes we don't have enough blood flow when we've worked a muscle, and then it's just kind of let's say you just sit down for the rest of the day, or you sit down for the 2 days after, you're not actually facilitating the blood flow to help with the recovery. And that's a huge aspect of the recovery. Obviously food, like when you start getting more into building muscle, you kind of want to make sure that you can time your carbs a little bit more around your training session, because that's when, especially after your training session, they say your muscles are more like sponges, which is true for that glucose. And that's a really important time to get those carbs in, because it also helps bring the stress levels down. So carbs are actually anti-stress after you train. So when you train, you're in a high cortisol, like it's the way it is. It's supposed to be like that. You're in that sympathetic state. But if you can get into that, what I call recovery state, or that parasympathetic state, as quickly as possible, you will just recover faster. So we'll boost that recovery. So you don't want to stay in that sympathetic state for too long after. So carbs really do facilitate that. And they help to bring the stress down after you train. They obviously replenish glycogen as well, which is part of it. And then enough protein is super important as well. I'm not super intense on the timing. Like, you don't have to be like smashing a protein shake 30 minutes after. It's more bookmarking the before and after workout meals to make sure that they have enough carbs, enough protein. And then, yeah, I think that things are important as well, just like your lifestyle, making sure that you're not too stressed about other things, because that will pull from the bucket of recovery from your training. So, you can think about, we have a limited amount of, I guess, recoverability, if that makes sense. So if we want to put it towards building muscle and recovering, then we have to make sure that we're balancing out the bucket and we're not taking it for all these other things in our life as well. So yeah, those would be the main things.
No, that's amazing. So there's probably women listening thinking, okay, this is something that I'm super interested in. And I know that you cover a lot of this in your programs. Can you just break down some of your offerings and where women can get involved or get started with you?
Yeah, sure. So I have a membership, which is $47 USD a month. And that is that's a really good starting point, because that's where I offer programs and they can kind of dip their toes into it. So there's even like a 2-day-a-week training program. 30 minutes training program. So there's like lots of levels of different programs to choose from. And there's actually a lot of support, which I don't think people realize. Like, I have such a great team of coaches, and we answer emails like in depth. We're in the Facebook group where people ask questions. So there's a lot of support as well. So it's something that you could kind of try out if you were thinking about it. It would be a great place to start. I also offer like every month new recipes and action kits. And I sort of give different strategies for different people's needs. Like, for example, if someone wants to lose fat, I've got different strategies of fat loss, I guess, approaches they could choose. If someone wants to build muscle, I have action kits on that. So there's lots of different information, and a lot of the nuance that I can't give on my Instagram, or, because it's just not enough room, I put it in my membership, which is cool. And then I also have a one-on-one program, which is where we basically just personalize everything. So I have 2 coaches that work with me, and we personalize, everything across the board to make it super in depth for you and what you need. And that's like a lot more hands-on, that one. So that one's $400 US a month. So they're my 2 offers.
Awesome. Yeah. No, I mean, I have done a few different ones of your programs, and I love them all. They're all super well designed and challenging, but not what you would consider, it's like you think of like, oh, this is going to kill me. And that's not Libby's training at all. Libby's training is really to the point. And I love that you focus on tempo as well, because it almost really trains you to be very mindful in the pace in which you lift. And it's amazing. Truly, your programs are really life-changing.
Thank you.
Of course. Well, thank you for just coming to share. I could talk to you for hours, but I feel like you have just educated us so much about just the complexity and the nuance to exercise and training, which is really important, and not going so far beyond just the physical benefits of exercise. You really are a testament to it, and it's just been so incredible to talk to you.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you're looking for any of the links or resources discussed today, or looking to find out more information on how to work with Libby or any of Libby's programs, make sure to check out the show notes linked in the description box below. If you enjoyed the episode and want to support the podcast, please share about it with others, share about it on social media, or like this video, subscribe to this channel, or leave a rating or review on any of the major platforms. I really rely on the amazing women like you in our community to spread the word. It's a team effort, right? And I also really value your ideas and thoughts about the podcast. So if you have any topics you've discussed or guests you'd like me to bring on, please go to jessicaashwellness.com/podcast to share those with me. If you go there and we're still doing a little revamp on the website, not a problem. Just email us directly at support@jessicaashwellness.com. If you want more content or you want to stay in the loop about new episode drops, follow me on Instagram at jessicaashwellness or sign up for my Sunday email at jessicaashwellness.com/email-subscribe. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you soon.